Imagine an empire so confident in its gods that it believed worship and loyalty were the same. Now imagine that empire being transformed, not merely by war or by barbarians at its gates, but by a small, radical movement of hope and faith. A movement that challenged the status quo, rocked the foundations of power, and helped divide the greatest empire of its day. This is the story of how Christianity transformed and, in many ways, divided the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire in the early 1st century AD was vast, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to the Euphrates River in the east, from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south. It was a world of marble cities, disciplined legions, and a pantheon of gods who seemed to watch over every corner of life. Rome's strength was not only in its armies, but in its unity of belief. The emperor was seen as semi-divine, and religion was woven into politics. Into this world was born a faith that would change everything: Christianity. Around AD 30, in the province of Judea, under the reign of Emperor Tiberius, Jesus of Nazareth began preaching a message that was unlike anything the Roman world had heard. He spoke of love for enemies, forgiveness, and a kingdom not of this world. To the Romans, this was harmless at first, just another sect among many. But when his followers began claiming that Jesus had risen from the dead, the message spread like wildfire. It offered hope, equality, and salvation in a world dominated by power and hierarchy. At first, the movement was small. Christianity spread quietly from Judea to Syria, to Asia Minor, to Greece, and finally to Rome itself. But with each new convert, the Roman authorities grew uneasy. Christians refused to bow to the emperor, refused to make sacrifices to Roman gods, and declared that Christ, not Caesar, was Lord. In an empire built on loyalty to the emperor, that was rebellion. Persecution soon followed. In AD 64, a great fire devastated Rome. Emperor Nero, desperate to deflect blame from himself, accused the Christians. The historian Tacitus records that Christians were torn apart by dogs, crucified, and burned alive as human torches. Yet, paradoxically, persecution only strengthened the faith. The courage of the martyrs inspired others. Over the next 2 centuries, waves of persecution came and went. Under Emperor Decius in the 250s, Christians were ordered to make public sacrifices to Roman gods. Many refused. They were imprisoned, tortured, or executed. Then, under Diocletian, between AD 303 and 311, the Great Persecution erupted, the harshest of all. Churches were destroyed, scriptures burned, and Christians hunted across the empire. Yet, even as the flames of persecution raged, the faith endured. The Roman roads and common languages of Latin and Greek allowed the message of Christ to travel faster than the soldiers who tried to stop it. Then, everything changed. In AD 311, Emperor Galerius issued the Edict of Serdica, acknowledging that persecution had failed and allowing Christians to worship freely in the East. 2 years later, in AD 313, a new proclamation, the Edict of Milan, was issued by Emperor Constantine and his co-emperor Licinius. It declared that all people could worship whatever gods they chose, including the Christian God. For the first time, Christianity was legal in the Roman world. Constantine himself would become one of history's most controversial figures. In AD 312, on the eve of battle at the Milvian Bridge, legend says he saw a cross in the sky with the words, "In this sign, conquer." Whether the story is fact or myth, Constantine claimed victory under that symbol. From that point on, he favored Christianity, building churches, granting privileges to bishops, and even convening the first great council of the church, the Council of Nicaea in AD 325, to settle disputes about the nature of Christ. By the time Constantine founded a new imperial capital at Byzantium in AD 330, renamed Constantinople, the old pagan world was fading. The once mighty temples of Jupiter and Venus were losing their worshippers. The cross, once a symbol of shame, was becoming the banner of empire. But this alliance between church and state would bring both glory and division. The next major turning point came in AD 380. Emperor Theodosius I issued the Edict of Thessalonica, declaring Christianity, specifically the Nicene form of it, as the official state religion of the Roman Empire. The old gods were outlawed, pagan temples were closed, and Christian orthodoxy became a matter of imperial law. The persecuted faith had now become the persecutor. This transformation divided the empire in more ways than one. Geographically, the empire itself was splitting. After the death of Theodosius in AD 395, the empire was permanently divided into East and West. The Western Empire ruled from Rome and later Ravenna, and the Eastern Empire ruled from Constantinople. The East would thrive for another 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire. The West would collapse within a century, falling in AD 476 when the last emperor was deposed by Germanic tribes. Religiously, Christianity was also dividing. Not everyone agreed on doctrine. Theological debates raged over the nature of Christ, the Trinity, and the relationship between church and empire. Councils met to define orthodoxy and condemn heresy. Those who disagreed, Arians, Donatists, Nestorians, were branded outsiders. The unity of the faith became as much a political issue as a spiritual one. Culturally, Rome itself was changing. Pagan festivals were replaced with Christian ones. Old temples were transformed into churches. The traditional Roman virtues, honor, strength, duty to the state, were reinterpreted through the lens of Christian humility and faith. Some Romans saw this as the empire's salvation. Others saw it as its undoing. Historian Edward Gibbon would later argue that the rise of Christianity weakened the Roman spirit of unity and discipline. While that claim is debated, there is no denying that the empire was no longer what it once had been. By the end of the 4th century, Christianity had completely reshaped Rome. Bishops were now civic leaders. The church owned vast lands. Charity, once a private virtue, became a social system. The emperor himself was seen as God's chosen ruler, enforcing religious truth. Yet, this alliance also bred tension when Emperor Theodosius ordered a massacre in Thessalonica. Bishop Ambrose of Milan barred him from communion until he repented. For the first time in history, a religious leader publicly humbled an emperor. It was a sign of things to come. The church had become powerful enough to stand toe-to-toe with the state. In the centuries that followed, as the Western Empire crumbled, it was the Christian church that held Europe together. Monks preserved knowledge, bishops governed cities, and popes negotiated with kings and invaders. The empire had fallen, but the church remained. In the East, the Byzantine Empire carried on as a Christian state, fusing theology and politics into one. This East-West difference would grow, eventually leading to the Great Schism of 1054, dividing Christianity into the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. So when we say Christianity divided the Roman Empire, we mean it in every sense, geographically, politically, spiritually, and culturally. It drew a line between East and West, between church and state, between old gods and the new faith. It gave Rome a new identity even as it dismantled the old one. Why does this story matter? Because it shows the power of ideas. The Roman Empire was built on armies and laws, but it was ultimately transformed by belief, by a message that said the last shall be first, that power is not the same as truth, and that faith can outlast an empire. Christianity began as a movement of outcasts, grew through persecution, and ended by shaping the destiny of one of history's greatest civilizations. By the time the Western Empire fell in AD 476, the symbols of Rome, the eagle, the legions, the Senate, had faded, but the cross endured. In Constantinople, churches rose where temples once stood. In Rome, the bishop of the city, the Pope, became a power greater than any emperor. The empire of stone was gone, but a new empire of faith had taken its place. So imagine standing in that basilica in Constantinople in AD 381, listening to the words of the Nicene Creed echo through marble halls. Outside, the statues of Jupiter and Mars are crumbling. The old gods are silent. And yet, within those walls, something entirely new is being born. A vision that will shape Europe, the Middle East, and the world for centuries to come. Christianity divided the Roman Empire, but it also transformed it. It broke it apart, and yet gave birth to a new world. From persecution to power, from the cross to the throne, the story of how faith reshaped Rome reminds us that no empire, no matter how strong, can stand unchanged when its people believe in something greater than fear, greater than power, something eternal. That is the legacy of how Christianity divided the Roman Empire. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Leave a comment below. Which part of this transformation fascinates you most? The persecution, Constantine's conversion, or the final division of East and West? History lives on when we tell its stories. And this one reminds us that even the mightiest empire can be changed forever by faith.